Luke, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're planting.
Great. Yeah. So I'm married to Sally, and we've got 4 kids. The youngest of which is about 9 weeks old at the moment. We've been church planting up in the western suburbs of Brisbane, in a suburb called Corinda. We've been doing that for about going on almost to 3 years now.
Can you tell us a little bit about the people of the area?
Sure. So Corinda itself is probably a middle class to upper class sort of area. The closer you move towards Brisbane is more so, but it's interesting as you move a suburb or two away from there, it heads into some of the more lower socioeconomic areas of Brisbane. So our church is kind of a mix of cultures and living standards and people, so it creates an interesting mix, but a really good dynamic.
And can you tell us why you're planting there?
I think initially we wanted to plant in the western suburbs. We had a number of people who kind of lived out that way, and so that was a natural way to go. And then we chose Corinda in particular because that corridor didn't have many, I guess, gospel-centered Bible teaching sort of churches, and we thought that that would be a great place for us to go, seeing there wasn't much of that there.
Great. And can you tell us how have you seen people's lives changed?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, a few kind of encouraging stories recently of just seeing a number of people come to know Christ, and we've been doing a little bit of going door to door and meeting with people, which is a little bit nerve-wracking at times. But through that, we've seen some people come to know Jesus, and a couple of people just in this past week have even put their faith in Christ. So that's been encouraging. And even I think a church plant kind of stimulates growth in people's lives. It creates opportunities for people to do things they normally wouldn't do. And so we've seen folks in our congregation really grow and mature, step into roles that perhaps they wouldn't have stepped into otherwise. And so I think that's brought a real growth in life and vitality to our church across the board.
Great. And can you tell us? Obviously, the Brisbane floods came through a year and a bit ago. Is there still great opportunities for evangelism? Post Brisbane floods.
Yeah, no. Like I think in certain areas, there's still some places that are rebuilding, and so there's definitely opportunity to minister to people in a practical way. I think for those that weren't directly impacted, if their house wasn't flooded, it's probably a distant memory now. But certainly for those whose houses were inundated and have had often a year or longer out of their home, it's still pretty fresh in their minds. And every time there's a big downpour, people immediately think flood. And so it's certainly around on people's minds, and yeah, sure, it creates opportunities.
Yep.
But I think the gospel, has many entry points and gates into people's lives, so that could be one of them.
Can you tell us what have you been learning from planting recently?
Sure. I kind of feel like at the end of every year, I kind of look back and wish I could start all over again, because you learn so much every year. So I think a church plant kind of stretches you into learning and growing in a quick way. You're trying and experimenting lots of things. I feel like I've learned a lot about just engaging our community with the gospel, and how to do that more effectively, how to do discipleship effectively in a small way. I think the way you do things when you're starting as a smaller church to a large church is different. And so we've had to learn how to do that well. I think personally, just learning to trust in God's sovereignty has probably been the biggest lesson over the 3 years, as my expectations maybe weren't met in some areas, and then having to rely on the Lord and just not worry about fluctuation in numbers and how things are going week to week, but really trusting in the Lord through that has been probably my biggest lesson.
And you spoke about new Christians coming on board in the last few weeks. How does that sort of impact the church life, and how does that impact you as a leader? Having people come to Christ who are obviously young in their faith, what impact does it have on the church as a whole?
I think it brings a joy and vitality. I think everyone is excited to see that, hey, there's a bunch of new Christians around. I think it gives opportunity for those who've been Christians for a while to go, oh, there's some people here that I can really help. I can begin to disciple and invest my life into them. So I think it creates opportunities for people to really serve and give themselves, and some people to really help grow in their faith that are younger than them. And then I think just the life that a new Christian has and their excitement in joining Christ is infectious and begins to overflow into the church, and just that sense that God's at work, and feel like there's greater expectation. Well, now what's going to do? So I think that filters through the church. So that's been a really positive and exciting time for us as a church.
All right. Excellent. Thanks heaps, Luke.